Welcome. My name is Jane Oates, and I'm the president of WorkingNation, and I'll be moderating a panel today that you're going to be very interested in. It's a panel that's going to look at leadership and philanthropy and how we build a better world. And with me, I have three amazing people. And to do them justice, I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. Brien, can I start with you?
Certainly. I'm Brien Biondi. I'm the CEO of Campden Wealth and the Institute for Private Investors. We're a 28-year-old membership organization of ultra-high net worth families. We're about education, peer-to-peer learning, connecting families to deal with issues around succession, governance, next gen. Certainly one of the biggest investment areas with the families today is impact investing and sustainability. And I'm happy to talk more about that as we move along.
Thank you. Kim.
Thank you, Jane. Hello, my name is Kim Cox. I'm the president and CEO of the Father McKenna Center. Father McKenna Center has been serving here in Washington, D.C. for almost 40 years. We serve two populations, folks that have been pushed out to the margins. We serve homeless men with a program to help them end their homelessness. And then we serve low-income families in our neighborhood who face food insecurity issues. With respect to the future, we also host college and university and high school students for a week of immersion learning about these social justice issues around hunger and homelessness. I'm delighted to be here today. Thanks, Jane.
Thank you, Kim. Jean.
Well, good morning, everyone. Gene Accius. I'm with AARP. AARP was founded in 1958 by a retired principal who went looking for her retired friend, who was a retired teacher, and eventually found her retired friend living in a chicken coop, a shack without walls. And for more than 60 years, we have been on a mission, as our founder envisioned, to really help ensure that older people have an opportunity to live a life of dignity, independence, and purpose as they age. And clearly, no one should be living in a state of poverty without the means to live a life of dignity as they age. And as a result, so for more than 60 years, we've been focused on addressing the issues of health, addressing the issues of wealth, and thinking about how health and wealth connects to your overall well-being, particularly as you age.
Wow, thank you very much. So let's start our discussion. I warned the audience that we were going to talk about leadership. So let's start with that. How do you think good leadership and effective partnerships are going to help all of us not only help everyone live a longer and better life, but also help us reach the UN sustainability goals? What do you think? And it's everybody.
Would you like to go first?
Thanks, Jane. I'll go first. Thank you, gentlemen. I think that leadership has a really critical role, mostly because most leaders are at the pinnacle of a system of information. And so when you're at the pinnacle of a system of information, then you actually have the ability to figure out where the trends are going, but also where there are strengths happening, and then where there are places where you can refocus resources. So I think leadership's really critical there in terms of that, just that knowledge information. The other place that I think leadership is going to be really important is in listening. There's a lot going on. So even though a leader has got all that information available, we leaders still need to listen carefully to our staffs, to the people that we serve, to our board members, and to our partners. So I think the partner question is really important. And in my sphere here in the Washington, D.C. area, where we are dealing with men who are homeless in particular, there's a whole ecosystem of nonprofits, government agencies that are trying to serve this population. And so for each organization, bringing its strengths in and then knowing where to go when they need additional support or where they think they can make a difference in someone else's operation.
Great. Thank you. Gentlemen.
I would probably add that one of my favorite quotes is from Brien Stevenson. And Brien says that you cannot be an effective problem solver from a distance. There are nuances and details that you will miss from afar. And I think that particularly given where we've been over the last 19 and 20 months, effective leadership really requires us to get close, to really get close to the systematic challenges that we face, and then to really understand the nuances and the details that might actually get lost when you're from a distance. So we have to get close. I think to add on to the points that Kim, you just said, absolutely leadership and listening is critically important. I also think that some of the challenges that we face, particularly, again, from thinking about what we've been through collectively as a society over the last 19, 20 months, really requires us to think from a multi-sectoral point of view. That clearly effective partnership, particularly in order to accelerate the pace of progress, because COVID-19, particularly as it relates to some of the sustainable development goals, has actually pushed some progress back. So it's going to require us to think collectively and collaboratively about what is the role for the public sector, what is the role for the private sector, what is the role for private philanthropy or non-public philanthropy, and what are the roles that we as individuals can play in helping to solve some of these effective solutions.
I love the fact that you bring individuals because we all are agents of change,
That's exactly
or should be. Okay, Brien, so people
Yeah.
are going to really be interested in what you're saying because you influence influencers.
I would say that from my perspective, I look at families today of wealth that I think have a great deal of influence and are able to really bring around change in a significant manner. And certainly from the surveys that we've done in the last 18 months, we surveyed over 365 families globally, and about 70% are active in impact or sustainability investing. And I think that part of that leadership is the families, is the next gen, that they're very passionate. And I think the passion is a big part of that leadership moving forward because they really are, I look at some families that are billion-dollar families where the next gens have mandated an asset allocation of X amount of money that needs to go to impact investing or sustainability. And that to me is where I see the families playing a leadership role going forward, in particular the next gen.
That's great. And I'm going to ask you just to stop quickly for our viewers and define impact investing, because I think it's one of those terms that we use a lot and people don't really understand what's the difference between impact investing and the old way of investing.
Well, and let me define between impact and sustainability.
Mm-hmm.
Sustainability investing is really the lenses of which you make that investment. What impact does it have on the environment? What social impact does that investment have? What type of governance is overseeing that investment? Impact investment is where there is a measurable impact to humanity, to society, but also delivering a return on your investment. And I don't want to use the word rage because it sounds like that's a fad. It's not a rage. Impact investing is here. It's growing so much in the ultra high net worth space. And they're getting really nice returns from their investments, but they're having an impact on society, a measurable impact.
Nothing wrong with doing good
Good
while you're
stuff.
doing well,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a good thing. Jean, I'm going to pick on you for a second because I want to make sure that people are aware of some of the amazing work you're doing at AARP. So could you tell us a little bit about your newest ventures to make sure people are, not only, you can't do much to make us live longer, but you can certainly make sure we're living well longer.
Right. Oh, well, thanks for that question, Jane. There's a couple of things I would like to just really lay as the foundation. One is the fact that we're aging, and aging is a good thing. It's actually a really good thing. And not only are people aging, but they're living much longer. So in the United States, you have about 12,000 people who are turning 65 each and every day. In China, that's 54,000 people who are turning 60 each and every day. Somewhere around the world, you have 200,000 people who are turning 60 each and every day. So when you think about the aging of the population and the fact that in many cases that you're seeing this growth in terms of life expectancy, clearly COVID has dampened some of that. But the point is the fact that society, communities, businesses need to kind of think about exactly how do you leverage that? That is a competitive advantage. So some of the work that we've been doing has to do with the fact that people are living longer, in many cases want to or need to continue working. So how do we work with the private industry and employers to think about how do they leverage their multi-generational workforce? Many companies have 5 generations in the workplace. So how do you leverage that, particularly as we're emerging from this pandemic, in a way that benefits the workers and in a way that actually benefits the employers? And through this major initiative with the World Economic Forum called Living, Learning, and Earning Longer, we have over 55 global companies with a reach of 2.7 million employees and over $1 trillion worth of economic revenue, total revenue, that is driving systemic change around creating a workforce that is more age inclusive, that is thinking about how they leverage the insights and the talent that happens across the life stage in a way that benefits the mission of the organization, the company, and of course, the customer base. The last point I would say is the fact that all of your customers are aging. So the question becomes, is there a longevity or an aging strategy as part of your efforts as a company or as an organization? How are you going to be relevant to this population, not just now, but also in the near future? And the last point I would say is the fact that when you think about, particularly in the US context, the buying power of the 50 plus, 56 cents of every dollar spent in the United States in 2018 was spent by someone over the age of 50. And that by 2050, it'll be 62 cents of every dollar. So thinking about what is your longevity, what is your aging strategy, I think is going to be critically important, both from a work perspective, but also from a financial resilience perspective.
Thank you so much. And Kim, that kind of bleeds into, in my mind, into a question for you, because clearly we're all living longer, even the neediest among us. How are you working at the McKenna Center with partners to make sure that your clients who may be, approaching 50 and approaching 55, and how do you make sure they're getting all that they need in terms of healthcare and job training and support?
Right. Jane, that's a great question. And the slice of the population that's homeless that we serve is averaging over 50.
Wow.
And there are a lot of health concerns for those folks. So there's a couple of things that you can do. Washington, D.C. is a very, very generous community. So there are lots of resources. One of the most important things is to point them to partners who will be able to serve them. So we happen to be located 4 or 5 blocks from one of the Unity clinics, which serves the indigent. It serves people without the ability to pay. So we make sure that they get exams, that they get their medical needs met. And part of our program includes 9 steps to end homelessness. The 4th step actually is a mental and physical health assessment, because folks need to know where they are. And if you've been homeless for a significant period of time, and again, the people that we serve have been homeless for quite some time, they have neglected to take care of their health. So we've got issues around diabetes. We've got issues around high blood pressure. We've got issues around heart conditions that are particular for the population that we serve. So we make sure that they get access to those resources. And then we bring in people to make presentations. So one of our partners is Georgetown University Medical College. And first-year medical students come to the Father McKenna Center, and they spend some time with the folks in our food pantry doing a health history, blood pressure checks, and blood sugar checks. And then they came just on Monday evening and spent 2.5 hours over dinner with the men in our hypothermia transition program. So again, they did the health history question. They got to know each other as individuals. So for the training for the students, working with folks that they may never have had any contact with is important. For the men in the program who are homeless, working with a young doctor is also something they may have never had an opportunity to do. So it's very mutually important for this. And again, I think, as Jane said, any care that we can provide early on is going to help with that longevity and quality of life. I mean, we're really committed to quality of life.
That's beautiful. And I think it's such a nice thing when you hear that Georgetown Med is going there, because many of those students haven't had the opportunity to meet people diverse in that way, different colors, different genders, different cultures, but different ages.
Yeah.
And to build that respect at the very beginning of your training, just really important for that. So I'm going to shift a little bit, Brien, because you talked about your investors, your families looking at impact investing, which I'm so in favor of. But some of the projects that Jean has described, and certainly the McKenna Center that Kim described, are not short-term ROIs. These are long-term projects where people have to be able to feel the kind of ability to stick with something until you see results. How are you managing that as we're marching towards the 2030 end goal for the sustainability goals, of course, but how do you explain that to your investors?
Well, I think, first and foremost, families tend to have more of a long-term horizon in their investment approach in general. And the families today, families of wealth, want to be associated with something that's good in society. They want their family name, their brand, their next gens to be involved in that. And so there is a internal push within the family to educate the children and the next gen and the grandchildren around impact and sustainability. But one of the challenges they have is they have an interest in it, but they don't know much about it. You know, impacts is relatively new on the scene, so we spend a lot of time educating the families around the different impact investments, what kind of returns to expect, how to do due diligence. Last month in Palm Springs, we had about 110 families with us for 3 days around our Impact and Innovation Conference, and we bring in investors. We bring in companies that are looking for investment in the impact space, and it's just I feel very blessed that I have seen so many very unique companies that are having a real impact on society, and again, a measurable impact with a nice return. I was with somebody just yesterday. It's a really interesting company. It's different, but they have they are reducing debt for the debt that students, I won't say they're necessarily young students, but students who've gotten from college and grad school and med school, and they do it in a way that the investor's getting 7% back on their money, and everything above that goes to paying the debt down. And just different. I was just with another company that's built this tremendous. They're growing vegetables way out in the desert. It's this monster facility that they've created, and these projects are just coming around all over the planet. These new companies with having a sustainable impact, and it's just great.
Boy, I think that's amazing because, people, back to the student, I'm a recovering education policy person, and people think that it's just 22-year-olds that have debt. They forget that their parents sign on to those Parent Plus loans. So you have lots of people looking at retirement being $40,000, $50,000 in debt. What an innovative way for investors to make a difference.
The investors are getting their money back. I mean, I've talked about 4 investors that have invested in this fund, and they love it. They're getting their money back. They're getting a nice return, 7%, and everything on and above that's going to pay down the debt.
Boy, that's just terrific. So I want to give the people that are tuning into this an opportunity, because unlike us, everybody doesn't have the opportunity to meet incredible people like you every day. So I want to ask you, and it doesn't have to be 3, but I'll start with 3. For some reason, I always say 3. What are the 3 big lessons you've learned in your current position or the road to your current position that could inform others about inclusive, sustainable, smart leadership and growth?
Well, I'll start.
Okay.
Ladies first.
Thank you very much. In my work, telling stories is very important, and it's that human impact. As Jean said, the getting proximate, getting close is real important. Well, not everyone's going to be able to spend time in a soup kitchen or work with our folks in the food pantry, but our human instinct, right, is to connect to people. So the use of stories, I think, is very, very powerful, and it will make a difference. So I would say that's one thing I've learned. The other thing I've really, really learned is to hire people who are smarter than I am. Because when I hire people who are smarter than I am, we as a team do a lot better. And I'm sure that's probably written in some book somewhere, some business book, but really it works when I hire people that are smarter than me. So in my career, that's been really important. And then the other thing I think that has been really important for me is to listen to my staff, because they're on the front line. They really know what's going on. And if I listen to them, then I'm going to be better and more effective. And I think that can apply to everybody in any situation that you're in.
Mine is pretty short and sweet. I know I've run a number of companies over the years, and what I've tried to do is create a space where people can be very genuine in their conversation. And I find that by when people can be very genuine in conversation, it creates ideas and it creates opportunities. And so that's where I'm a believer, is creating a space where people can be very genuine in their discussion.
That could be an advertisement for Ideagen. You're right on cue. That's exactly right.
Well, I don't know how to top that. What I will say is the fact that I think that there's a couple of things I've learned along the way. And I think that it's fair to say that I'm still learning. And I think that's a key element of leadership, is just the sense of humility that it requires to be in a position to continue to learn and grow. I think that the 3 points I would just mention is the fact that in addition to hiring very smart people, as Kim, as you indicated, I think the other aspect of that too is learning when to move out the way and allow these smart people to do what they were hired to do. I think that the other thing that I've learned is, as a leader, the importance of being vulnerable. I know that in our society pre-COVID, vulnerability was potentially seen as a sign of weakness. But I think that what I've learned, at least over the last 20 months, is the fact that as a leader, if you don't show that vulnerable side, then you actually might cut off or shut off some of those who are following you. And I learned that when I actually demonstrated my sense of vulnerability, it actually created a sense of trust among our team, even in a virtual environment that was not necessarily there before. So the opportunity to say, you know what, no, I'm not okay today, I think is a very powerful statement, because I bet you there's someone on your team who's not okay today. And then finally, the idea that we're really all interdependent. And I think that that's one of the things that is clearly important, is the fact that what you do impacts me and what I do impacts you. And I think that going against the grain of independence, which is this idea of I, to really interdependence, which is this idea of we, and really creating that culture to do that.
Beautiful. Creating that culture is difficult. You're
Yeah.
exactly right. And it's a challenge that all of us face.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to go back to one of the other words that you brought up. I think we would be tone deaf if we didn't bring up COVID. COVID is still with us. It's divided our country in so many ways. It's cost us over 700,000 lives. But what do you think the impact of COVID will be moving forward? How has it changed us? And if you can, how has it changed us for the better?
I think you can go.
Well, I think, as ugly, as ugly as COVID has been and is, there's certainly some good that's come out of it in terms of the way that I think it's brought families closer together. It certainly has had an impact on a lot of my staff in terms of they talk about how they're closer with their families, their spouses, and the way we work. I think it's changed the work life for really forever. And I think in some ways it's improved the work life. And even when I look at the family offices today, this COVID is changed in terms of how everybody's working from home. There's new cybersecurity issues because there's so much data that's coming to the home computer. And but I do think that it's brought people closer together.
And do you think it will change philanthropy? Will people give differently or give more?
Well, there's no question that during COVID, families stepped up in terms of their giving. I mean, I saw that, I heard that. So I think that will continue. And, families are when we looked at kind of the top 10 areas where families are investing in, education and healthcare were the top 2.
Oh, that's interesting. Kim, what do you think? How
Well,
has COVID changed, or will it change us in the future?
Well, I think that it has made us all understand how interdependent we are. Going back to what Jean said. I mean, we really are connected to one another in ways that we probably didn't realize. And I think that is only good, because it builds more of a we, less of an I, because what we do, I'm just going to steal all your words, Jean, what we do has an impact on everyone else. And one of the things that we saw is that donations increased significantly because of the kind of work we were doing. And I think people felt very good about doing that. And then I believe that will encourage more philanthropy in the future. Maybe not necessarily for my organization, but for other organizations, because people felt good about that, right? In COVID, so many of us felt like, I can't do anything. I feel so helpless, so impotent. But it gave people an opportunity to do something. I think philanthropy will stay at a higher level. That's what I expect.
That's great. Jean.
We're about less than 2 months away from 2022. Think about that. We're about 7 weeks away from 2022, right? And if you sit with that for a second, you're saying to yourself, wow, that's unbelievable. It doesn't even feel like it's 2021. It actually feels like an extended remix of 2020, right? And I think that COVID has really given us a tremendous opportunity to do some big things. in 2022 and 2023 and beyond. I do believe that, I've heard so many people say, I can't wait to get back to normal. And I counter that all the time because I don't know what that means. And I think that when we watch the lines of families looking for food over the last couple of months, when we've seen the number of people continue to be infected and, lose their lives to this pandemic, when we've seen a lot of the system challenges that we face on the table for us to deal with, that's not a normal that we can afford to go back to. So I do think that on one hand, COVID has really given us this gift. And this gift is to think about how do we work across sectors? How do we really build these partnerships in a way that can actually solve these challenges? And I think the biggest tragic situation we can do is to hope that things will get better. We have to be intentional about it. And I think that's the fact that we clearly took a lot of things for granted. And now we've been given an opportunity to reset and build something new. And the question is, are we courageous enough to do it?
Boy, that's the big question, right? I mean, so many inequities became visible during COVID. Let's make sure we work on them. Okay, last question. Believe it or not, we are out of time, almost out of time. So my last question for you today is to talk directly to the audience. What's the call to action? We went back in the beginning and said that corporations and government and educational entities and nonprofits all have a role to play in building a more inclusive economy. What's your call to action to the individuals watching us today? Okay, Brien, you're up first.
I know it sounds simplistic, but I think the call to action is to really find your passion. And I know a lot of people say that, but what does it really mean? And how do you find that passion? And I tie it to a story when I was 16 years old and I was having lunch with my grandfather. I said to my grandfather, I want to be a lawyer because lawyers make a lot of money. And he said to me, Brien, you don't need to be a lawyer to make a lot of money. You just need to be good at what you do. And I think that if you find your passion, you'll be good at what you do. And that will have an impact on society, people in some manner.
Okay, find your passion. What else, Kim?
I think that the thing that we can all do that will make a difference is to just remove the blinders and look very carefully. I know that when any of us see someone who's homeless on the street, we feel something, right? We feel something, a whole range of emotions from compassion and pity to possibly disgust, right? But we all feel something. And so when we see someone in need, not just someone who's homeless, I would really invite you to take off the blinders and understand what you're feeling. And then what is that feeling calling you to do? Just like Brien said, does that stir in you a passion? Is there something that you can do to make a difference? And for someone who's homeless, it may not be just giving away $1, because that in some ways, that's kind of cheap charity, right? Yeah, I'm done. So that's what I do. Let's lose the blinders.
Beautiful. Jean.
For me, I think it's just really simple. Inaction is a choice. And if you decide not to do something, you have just made a decision. And you are part of the problem or you're part of the solution. And there's no in between.
Beautiful. You got great advice from 3 fabulous panelists. Thank you for joining this panel. I promised you a great panel. I delivered, and I hope you'll stay tuned for the rest of Ideagen.
Excuse me. So we actually got a question submitted from one of our Ideagen City Forum members, Chef Maria Lloyd from Ideagen, New York. And this is open to any one of you, including you, Jane. What are some unusual cross-sector collaborations that have been successful in achieving the goals, and how can we encourage more pairings like these? Open to anyone.
Anybody want to start? You brought up one with the health clinic and the
Right.
McKenna Center. I mean, that's unusual. What else have you seen out there?
Well, it's interesting. So yesterday I had an opportunity to visit a program called Vehicles for Change. And it's a program that does a couple of things. One is the fact that it actually works with individuals who are re-entering our society. So they refer to them as returning citizens. So these were individuals who are incarcerated and now they're back into the community. And what Vehicles for Change actually does is that it does a couple of things. One is it provides these returning citizens with skills around actually building cars and fixing cars. In addition to that, so they're guaranteed a job once they've gone through this program. Now think about that. Not only are they guaranteed a job, but then they're also given access to a car. And I was telling my wife last night, we take so many things for granted. If you think about just access to transportation and how that's the gateway to opportunity. And what they've done is that they've worked with they clearly worked with the state of Maryland. They're also working with the bank. And what they've done with the bank is the fact that they give the individual a car, used car, good condition. They pay $900 for the car. They get a loan from a bank. The bank gives them 12 months to pay off the car. And guess what they're doing? They're actually establishing credit or rebuilding the credit. So, I mean, so think of the program. They've had over 700 families gone through this program over 20 years. And I had an opportunity to hear from one of the alums yesterday who, as a result of this program, went and got her bachelor's degree and now has 2 master's degrees and owns her own workforce development. That's why I thought about you, Jane. Own her own workforce development company. So so that's an opportunity, I think, where you're blending the sectors in a way to change lives. And it has a generational implication, right?
Absolutely.
Literally disrupting poverty at its core.
Absolutely. Anybody else? I hope we gave the questioner some good ideas. And stay in touch with these panelists. You know, AARP, get to know, they can't stay in touch with you, Brien, unless they're people of wealth. I'm sorry.
No.
If you don't know the McKenna Center, get to know them, but really stay in touch with Brien. I'm sure everybody's on LinkedIn. Link in with them and stay in touch and watch what they're doing. Thanks again.